Okay, in this video, what we're going to do is take a few minutes and focus on the creation of objects in our virtual world.
Woohoo, we're building stuff.
We're building stuff. Now,
Finally.
we have kind of touched on this slightly throughout all the videos up to this point, because obviously from time to time we need to put something in the scene to demonstrate functionality.
Exactly.
And also when talking about the Create command panel, we mentioned, here's where you can make stuff.
Yep.
So now we're going to focus just a little bit more on activating one of these creation buttons, if you will, making something. We're going to talk a little bit about, the parameters you're going to see below, how they're laid out, and then what happens when you deselect an object and getting back to those parameters over on the modify
Protocols of creation.
Yes. And
Now
parameters, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Because these can maybe even be called parametric objects.
Oh, look at you go.
Yeah.
Dun, 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 meaning...
Scrabble.
Meaning
10,000 word score.
Meaning that while they exist as that type of object, they have a bunch of parameters that allow you to change the shape that we're looking at.
Right,
change the detail, change the radius if it was something like a sphere. But once we collapse it down to a mesh, we're dealing with just a whole bunch of vertices, or points in space, that have little lines connecting them, and then solid filled-in areas known as polygons or our faces.
Once we do that, we really can't change those parameters anymore.
Precisely.
We lose them.
Yeah.
And we'll see that. We'll go through all of that in this video so you guys have a basic idea of what we're talking about.
Well, let me start. Let me create a shape and see what happens.
Okay.
So I'm going to click Sphere on the Create panel.
Okay. And again, just to throw in real quick, as we talked about earlier, remember, up underneath the Create panel, everything is categorized, and then when you select one of these categories, it's further categorized. And as Bill's got it here, we're going to make some geometry. What kind of geometry? Standard primitive.
Yeah.
What
and
type of
kind of like
printer? Sphere.
Right, exactly. And since this is kind of like an intro to object creation, we're going to start with simple shapes, or primitives, if you will.
You got
Primitive
it.
shapes. So I'm just going to click and drag here in my viewport. I'm going to hit F4 to get wireframe on shaded, and we have a sphere created. Wow. Isn't that beautiful?
Yeah, it is. And as we mentioned earlier, this is a really important thing to keep in mind. Back in the command panel videos in the UI section, we talked about when you activate one of these creation tools, as I like to call them. In this case, you're using the sphere tool to create a sphere.
Right. Sure.
It's still active at the moment.
Yes.
We're still looking at a bunch of parameters down below. And these parameters, it started adjusting that radius real quick.
Sure.
Okay.
These control the most recently created objects.
Exactly. But the moment you click in the viewport again, I can't stress this enough. I stressed it in the previous video. I'll stress it in this
moving along,
one.
you're clicking, and whoa.
Now the radius is no longer tied to the one that you were just messing with.
Right.
You've just created a new sphere.
Yep.
Right.
And you will continue to do this as long as the sphere button or whatever creation button is depressed.
Right, so as long as, when you know you're done, just right-click, and that button is depressed, and now you will no longer create new spheres when you drag.
But Uncle Bill, all of the cool parameters that allowed us to do things like change radius, etc.,
They're all gone.
Where did they go?
Are they gone forever?
Absolutely not, Buzz.
Okay.
If you go right up here into your modifying panel, here they are again. And you could get back to the parameters, and you can continue editing your primitive by changing these parameters.
You guys got to lose the infomercial sound. It's like, Bill, where did those parameters go?
And that's not all.
So
you could also change the segments.
So we're changing the detail.
Yep.
As you notice, as we get less and less detail, it becomes less and less looking like a sphere.
Yes.
Now it's something that Superman would
diamond
worship. I don't know.
Let's bring that back up again. You could also turn off smooth, and now if you turn off with F4, wireframe unshaded, you could see it's faceted.
That's right. And if you act now, you get this smooth checkbox.
Speaking of smooth, notice how I'm smoothly zooming in and out by holding down the Control and the Alt keys while I zoom in and out.
That's something you didn't mention earlier, but just,
Sure, yeah, just wanted to point that out.
We're getting a little fancier now.
Yes, we are. Yes, so I'm holding down the middle mouse button, I'm holding down Alt and Control, and then I'm pushing forward and back with my mouse. I'm smoothly zooming as opposed to just using the mouse wheel to kind of scroll in
incrementally step forward and backward.
Very handy when you're dealing in with very tight spaces.
So let's go ahead and jump back over to the Create panel real quick.
Sure thing.
And now you'll notice, if I can,
steal the mouse away.
Steal the mouse,
again.
hit box. Now, as we start going through these different things we can create, obviously we're not going to click on every one because you guys can take 3 seconds apiece and get a good idea of what
it is pretty fun to display with these things.
And of course the parameters are going to change from one
object to the next. That's what I want everyone to see. Right now we're dealing with a box. So it would not make sense for us to have a radius.
Right.
So box, we have things like length, width, height, etc. Sphere, now we're looking at a radius. Cylinder. But one of the things you're going to find fairly consistent as we go through these is the word segments.
Yes.
Segments. again, as you saw a second ago, when Bill was making a change to the segments parameter over on the Modify panel, we were changing the amount of detail in this, and this does become very important as you guys progress into modeling, because you need enough detail if you're going to throw a modifier on something and expect the modifier to behave the way you think it will behave.
Absolutely.
So detail is something that we're going to start saying more and more, and that's my favorite word for it, just detail.
Yeah. Yep.
So that will stay consistent as we go through all of these various types of primitives that we can create.
And one thing that I really do like about Max is the fact that, these are parametric objects, and by creating them, you're actually kind of adjusting these parameters interactively in your viewport when you drag. So with the box here, once I click and drag here, it's going to actually draw it right on the grid. You're actually adjusting length and width as you move the mouse through the viewport. You can actually see them changing here in the parameters section on the right. And then once I let go, now it's letting me adjust the height.
And boy, is he really pointing out something really important. Not only the fact that we're interactively changing parameter values right now, but you will find that with our different objects that we can create, it is not always the same number of mouse clicks required to create that object.
Sometimes it's a two-step process.
With the sphere, it was simply click, drag out. Make a cone for us, Bill.
Sure thing.
Let's see what kind of clicks are required for a cone.
Now I'm going to draw this in the top viewport here, but I'm going to kind of look in my perspective viewport as I do.
I think my favorite example is the chamfer box.
So now one click, I'm letting go now. Now it's letting me create some height.
So he's dragging up, no mouse button is down.
Right, now I'm going to click one more time.
So he clicks again. Now he's clicked. Now he's adjusting his second radius, or the top end of the cone.
Very cool, and you can actually make this negative. Oh, no, you can't. My mistake. That's good that it doesn't let you do that.
Fool!
Yes, because I was bad.
I was thinking that would be really bad.
Yeah.
How to make illegal geometry.
Yay! So basically, what we're dealing with is the creation of objects will not always require the same number of clicks or /steps.
Sure. And not only can you create things in the Create panel, there are actually other methods that you can use to create geometry as well.
Okay.
For example, there's the Create menu. Going to Standard Primitives here, and Box, and now you could kind of do the same thing, start clicking and dragging. And that's basically the same thing as going here in your Create panel and hitting the Box button.
Exactly.
You could also go down here to your MaxScript Mini Listener. You can type in a command here, and I have a sphere. It's actually kind of inside my other sphere that was in the center there. And I just want to point out multiple ways of creating things.
Absolutely, and we will talk a little bit about MaxScript later, so as you guys watch Bill type in really cool-looking encrypted words like sphere, open, close parentheses, fear not. We shall talk about that in depth a little bit later on in this course.
And then if I control right-click in my viewport, making sure that I don't right-click here in the center, because we all know that resets our layout,
yes,
we can actually create some basic primitives here too, sphere, box, and plane.
Very nice.
I point that out as well.
Now, we've seen that we can go about creating these objects interactively, allowing us to drag them out, if you will. Can we create objects with a bit more precision? Let's say I was creating something for a popular game like Unreal Tournament 2000X, right?
You sure can.
20xdx.
Yes.
I'm going to hit the delete key real quick.
If I know that yay so many units is going to equal to yay so many units over in the game, and I know I need to create
20 by 20 by 30.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Can I do this? Yeah, numerically.
Yep, right here in keyboard entry.
Okay, so how does all this work? He's doing a sphere. What if we wanted to do a box?
Let's do a box.
All right, do a box.
Change my mind.
And we have a certain size. Zach, what size do you want?
Let's see, 20 in length, 20 in width, and 30 in height.
Okay.
We can also adjust the position, too, which is very cool.
We
We can. So now you guys can see that we can create with precision by simply filling in the numbers in our numeric entry fields over there and then hitting the Create button.
Very cool.
Yeah, very handy, too. All right, also, while we're sitting here on the box creation button, let's take a look at something else. You'll notice that, get Bill to move his mouse over here, that we have the creation method.
Right.
Some objects will allow you to make different types of that kind of object. In other words, a box could be in the shape of a cube.
Right, which is still a box.
A box.
Right. Yeah, it's still a box. It's just all the measurements in length, width, and height are all
equal.
The same.
Right. That's right.
So now I hit cube, and now I'm clicking and dragging, and whoa. Instead of being able to adjust my length and width and then height, I'm actually drawing it in one single motion.
Right. So we do have standard primitives. Now if I can get Bill to click on our little drop down up here, you'll notice that we also have extended primitives.
These are pretty fun.
These they are fun. Basically, we have all sorts of cool things here. And while Bill is dragging out some, just as some demonstrations.
Do a torus knot.
I'm going to do an oil tank first.
I'm going to talk as he's pulling these out. Yeah. Some of you guys that are completely new to working with stuff, with 3D applications, may be thinking right now, why would I want to create standard primitives? I mean, I want to create a human head or a character or whatever. These different pieces of geometry allow excellent starting points.
That's right.
So, believe it or not, you can come up with a fantastic character head from a box. Mm-hmm. You can also come up with one from a sphere as well. So, when you start your modeling process, think about what it is that you're going to create and start out with some sort of standard or extended primitive
so much fun to play with.
Starting point.
I haven't heard a word you just said. Just kidding.
That's okay, guys. Trust me, what I said was very important.
It's very important.
Please rewind the video and close your eyes
playing.
and ignore what Bill is doing.
So you'll notice we do have a lot of really neat things that we can, the capsules, the hose. There's a lot of cool things.
Right. Yeah.
And
very awesome.
And again, in talking about creating objects, right now we've just looked at some basic standard and extended primitives, but we are open to create a lot more than just that. As you notice up under this list, we've got compound objects, particle systems. All of this deals with the creation of different types of objects.
Sure.
And even then, we could go over if we wanted to and start creating things like a line, a circle. Maybe I need to work with shapes. More so than actual
2D
geometry.
Shapes.
That's right.
Interesting.
And these are fantastic building blocks
for
creating what you guys will find later as known as cages that we can then turn into surfaced geometry, which is really cool. So, you can literally come in here and start da, 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 but it's not curvy. Oh, but it can be.
Whoa.
We can start creating all sorts of really cool stuff. And trust me, this here is very, very powerful when it comes to modeling. So, we have lights, because obviously we're dealing with a 3D animation package, and we're not limited to just standard and extended primitives and shapes.
Right.
We're going to want to go in and light our scene, and there's different types of lights that we're going to talk about later. We've got cameras. Hello, guys.
We're dealing with
more than one. Exactly. We're dealing with a virtual world. We need to put cameras in there. We may need to animate them. We may need to change the focal length, do a depth of field type effect, all sorts of things that you can do with cameras. And then you get over into very cool things that you can use that will
helper objects
assist in more complex setups. I'm being very cautious with my word selection at the moment. We have helpers, which are visual indicators that provide some sort of help with something. May it be measuring, may it be just something that you're going to simply grab and move around, and it's going to control something else.
Kind of like an invisible parent to a hierarchy.
Precisely.
Something you can't see when you render.
Right. And you'll notice as we're going through these again, our subcategory continues to change with different types of, in this case, helpers that we can create. So don't lose sight that we have, like in lights, here's a good example. Lights have different types of lights that we can make, different types of helpers. So now we're dealing with forces, blah, blah, blah. There's a whole lot of things here that we can create. But again, so more things that can be created. These are objects that can be created in the scene that serve a very specific purpose. And then, of course, systems, if we want to start throwing bones in a character, or heck, create an entire skeletal system that's already complete.
Pretty neat.
Or fancy lighting stuff, daylight, sunlight, good stuff. So just remember, when talking about the creation of objects, it does go beyond just the creation of standard extended primitives.
Sure,
exactly. All you guys got to keep in mind is that everything is well categorized, subcategorized, and then when creating objects, it's a matter of using a create tool to activate it. It stays active until you right-click to turn it off or select something else.
Right.
We come down here, and we've got all of the parameters available to us as we create it that we can adjust. Once you complete the tool, the parameters are gone. You will need to select the object if you want to modify any of those parameters and come over to the Modify panel.
Right.
And this does bring us to the last thing that I would like to talk about in object creation, and that is the importance of naming your objects.
Oh, this is very important.
You can easily end up with a scene with hundreds, if not thousands, of objects.
It's true.
Yep. There is nothing more frustrating as an instructor to go up to a student that is new to working with Max. Let's say they've been working on some sort of special 2-week lockdown type project, and they have created hundreds and hundreds of objects. Go ahead and hit H for me, Bill, and bring up that select by name. Now, in this case, it's not that bad. We've got a few objects, but
they're all kind of different. So
fortunately, they're all different, so we can tell what they are. What happens when you have hundreds of things called Sphere 01, Sphere 02, Sphere 395?
And it's frustrating to a lot more than just instructors, because a lot of times if you're working on a big production, you're going to be working in teams.
That's right.
You're not the only person who's going to be dealing with a particular scene. And so when someone else who's trying to help you work on your scene comes and looks at your work, and all they find is this gigantic array of spheres or boxes or torus knots or whatever.
They're not going to be all that happy with you.
That's right. I mean, if you're trying to set yourself up in a position where you have been outcast from the team, where no one's going to buy you lunch today.
That's right.
Then,
don't name things.
Don't name anything at all. Yeah. It's that simple. But naming things is very important, and we can go about doing this. Bill, how?
Well, there are multiple ways that we could do this, but the way that I like to do it the most is to select the object, then go here, highlight, and then give it a name right here. So we'll call this one Zach. We'll call this one...
Call that one Buzz because it's interesting.
Yeah. And then Bill can be the ring wave because he's animated and,
Yes, he is.
Wow. Okay.
Oh, how cool is that? Yeah. And Zach and I just sit there.
Yeah, kind of stare.
So now if you hit H, you can now see Bill, Buzz, and Zach.
That's right. Yeah. For those of you that are in this course taking the online portion of it, naming your objects is extremely important. If you want to find a way to fail an assignment quickly, don't name your objects.
Absolutely.
It's that easy.
Yeah. Student Slayer won't stand for that.
And neither will Bill and neither will Zach. Here's a really easy way to visualize this. Let's say you're creating a skeletal system for a character that happens to have 120 bones in it.
Mm-hmm.
Bone 01, bone 02. It would be a lot easier to see left clavicle, left upper arm, left forearm.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. You don't know which bone you'd be adjusting, especially if you're doing it through something like a script or code.
And you may be thinking, well, I'll just simply select it and wait for it to highlight in the viewport. Why are you wasting time?
Yeah.
That's my question. Now you're not working efficiently, and working efficiently is extremely important in the 3D world because nowadays it's not only about quality, but it's about how fast can we get that quality. And speed is important.
And also, if you wanted to name an object, you're not limited to this create panel here. You could pretty much name them in any panel you want.
Yep.
I mean, that's how important naming is. It's consistent across all the panels in the command panel.
Couldn't help but notice that I'm pink.
All right. Well, let's change that, shall we? Let's double-click on the swatch. You want a more manly color, Zach? Maybe
I'm not even going there.
A deep blue?
I'm not even.
There you
go. Deep blue.
Yes, we're now compensating.
But Bill did just point out something important. You may find yourself wanting to organize your basic geometry with specific colors with the intent of applying true paint or materials later.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And you can do that, as Bill just demonstrated, by bringing up our little color chooser and choosing a color for the particular object. It's that easy. All right, so that's really going to wrap it up, unless there's anything else you guys can think of we need to add.
Can't think of anything we haven't
That's all I can think of.
The only thing that I thought we'd bring up is that the parameters you see on each object are not necessarily permanent.
Yeah, let's go ahead and talk about that, because that's great.
Sure.
We did mention that at the very beginning, because we know right now, as we select these different objects that we've created, that if we go over to the Modify panel, which we are at the moment, we have access to the parameters still, and we can continue to adjust things interactively with these spinners.
That's right.
Until we're happy with it. We can really tweak.
Then we can collapse the stack. We can basically convert the geometry to, an editable polygon, editable mesh, or whatever.
Some sort of
editable geometry.
That's right.
Yeah. So and there are multiple ways to do this, too. One way I like to do it is I just like to right-click on my object. It's pretty handy. And then here in the Transform menu, come down to Convert To, and now we actually have the choices of what we can convert this primitive object to.
Right.
So I'll choose Editable Poly.
Ooh, notice how all that changed.
Yeah.
We no longer have the ability to control its radius, its height, etc.
That's right, because this is just, at this time, now just a polygonal object. It is a collection of vertices, edges, and polygons.
That's right. It is now made up of sub-objects.
Right.
And we will, there they are.
Yep.
And just grab a few vertices and move them around, just so you can see. So now if you want to change the height of this, you would go in here and select all of the vertices and move them up physically.
That's right. We've lost the convenience of all of those sliders and spinners and whatnot to actually adjust the parameters on our own.
But now we can do cooler things, like as opposed to doing the entire top, now we may want to actually change the shape of it all together where it no longer looks like a capsule.
Interesting. You might say you're almost modeling at this point.
Yeah, modeling. What do you know?
Kind of cool.
So we'll talk more about this a little bit later on, but you've now seen it. And with that, that is going to wrap up this video on the creation of basic objects in 3ds Max. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everyone.